Today's sermon has the theme Pharaoh's stubbornness. Pharaoh's stubbornness. And if you're following along, you can follow along in your Bible in the book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus. And if you go to Exodus chapter 6 and verse 29, we have God revealing himself in a very special way. You see, on the earth at the time, a lot of people didn't really know Yahweh, the true God. Sure, they had heard of the flood in Noah's day, but that had already been a long time ago. And so Yahweh was appearing and speaking to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because he was planning to create a nation through these men. And so they were known, Yahweh was known to the children of Jacob and Joseph. Um, and the Israelites, these children of Jacob, came to be living in Egypt at the time because there was a big famine. And so over time, through the generations, their numbers were really starting to grow. This family was really starting to grow. And at this particular time, their family had grown to be in the numbers of approximately 1.5 to 2 million people conservatively. And the new Pharaoh saw how many Israelites there were and decided that he didn't want to be kind to them anymore, as the previous Pharaoh had been. He became intimidated. He was concerned that maybe they would rise up against him since they've become a group the size of a whole country, a nation. And so he decides to enslave them. Of course, they could be useful as slave labor. Imagine 1 million men nearly, along with women and some of the teenagers and some of the elderly. This could be a very big workforce, and it was a very mighty slave force for Pharaoh. And so he enslaved them, but he decided not just to be oppressing them, but to actually be unkind to them in his oppression. And the Israelites started to call out to their God, Yahweh. And Yahweh went to Moses and said, Moses, I have an assignment for you because I'm hearing the cries of my people and I'm seeing the heart of this Pharaoh. I'm looking at my timetables and it's time to go. It's time for my people to leave Egypt and to start their own proper nation. And so Moses asks, who am I supposed to tell them you are? Because this is going to be a very big introduction of the true God, not just to the nation of Israel, but to the entire world and the world power Egypt at that time. And he introduces himself with the meaning of his name. He says, I am what I am, or I will be what I will be, which means literally, I can become whatever I choose to become. I will be everything you need when it comes to my people, my will. I can become anything I choose to become. And that's the meaning of the name Yahweh. At verse 29 of chapter 6 of Exodus, it says, Yahweh told Moses, I am Yahweh. Speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything that I am speaking to you. And he starts to give and break down for Moses some instructions on how he's supposed to do this, to go in before Pharaoh. He's going to take with him Aaron to help him out. And he can bring his staff, this stick. And he says, if Pharaoh wants proof that you're coming in from God, then you can throw this stick on the ground. It's going to turn into a snake. But the point is, I need you to let Pharaoh know you're going to need to allow my people to depart. You're going to lose your slave labor. Now, of course, Pharaoh didn't take this message very kindly. He rolled his eyes at it. Moses did what he said, what he was told to do, and dropped the stick and it turned into a snake. But then Pharaoh had his magic practicing priests go in and conjure up some sorcery, witchcraft, or whatever they were doing. And they were able to kind of do something similar. They could put some sticks down and then make them look like they turned into snakes. So Pharaoh said, "Hmm, be gone with you." But he didn't pay attention to the fact that Moses' snake ate the other snakes and then turned back into a staff. Moses took his staff and he left. And Pharaoh was stubborn in his heart. And God predicted this. He explained to Moses, Pharaoh's not going to be easygoing. So I need you to understand it's going to be like I've hardened his heart because I'm going to expose his stubbornness. And I'm going to utilize his stubbornness to show who I really am, to show my power, not just to the Israelites, but to the nation of Egypt, the world power, and the entire world. And for generations, they will tell this story, and everyone will know that I am Yahweh. And Moses just did whatever God told him to do. So that the next day, God came into Moses and said, go meet Pharaoh down by the river when Pharaoh is doing his daily trip there. And I want you to tell him, hey, I told you to let my people go, and I see that you haven't done it. So now I'm going to turn the Nile River, which you rely on for water and for bathing, into blood. So it will become useless. And Moses did just that. And he went down to the river and met Pharaoh there. And Pharaoh was stubborn as always. So Moses did what God told him to do and lifted up his staff over the river, and the entire river turned to blood. Now, any reasonable person at this point would say, okay, you just turned the Nile River, okay, a wonder of the world, into blood now. Okay, so all our fish are dead, which that's a big part of how we eat, and all our water is gone, and we can't bathe. And this is frightening, by the way, and the entire nation can see this. And by the way, you're embarrassing me and you're embarrassing our gods. Because in the nation of Egypt, they didn't have Yahweh. They didn't acknowledge Yahweh. They acknowledged a pantheon of gods, multiple gods, such as Hapi, the god of the Nile. They also had Num, the god of the Nile, the guardian of Nile's source of life. And so Egypt, life source was the Nile River. And now Yahweh said, it's nothing. It's blood. I control it. And so you can imagine he's going to his priests and he's saying, okay, you need to do something about this. And the Egyptian priests are doing their magic and their sorcery and their witchcraft, and they're not able to turn the water back into water. It stays in as blood. But what they are able to do is to perform a trick, kind of makes it look like they can turn water into blood. And ultimately, Pharaoh does not let the people go. He's hard in his heart. He's stubborn. And so at this time, Yahweh goes back to Moses and says, okay, now I want you to go in before Pharaoh again. And this time, if he doesn't let the people go, we're going to bring a new plague among him. And so he goes into Moses or to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh does not let the people go. So Moses brings the next plague. The next plague is the plague of frogs. This doesn't mean that there's a few hundred frogs. No, this means that there are a countless number of frogs that just come up seemingly out of nowhere, and they are covering everything. And in the nation of Egypt, they don't have screens on their windows, so the frogs are inside the house. They are inside the food. They're inside the bed. They're hopping around. They become frightening. And the frogs in the nation of Egypt used to be considered holy. And now they're a nightmare. They're an actual source of terror. And so Pharaoh and the Egyptians are horrified by this plague of frogs that's everywhere, but what's more is it's embarrassing the gods like Hecate, which is the goddess of fertility and childbirth, which is depicted by a frog head. So they actually had a frog god. But what was sacred now became a curse. Why? Because Yahweh is the one, the God that has the true power. And so Pharaoh cannot handle these frogs. And so in verse 8 of Exodus chapter 8, he says, plead with Yahweh to take the frogs away, and I will let the people go so that you can go and worship your God, Yahweh. And so Moses says, okay. And he prays to Yahweh, and Yahweh makes the frogs disappear, showing his power. And what happens? Well, when Pharaoh saw that the frogs were gone, he changed his mind and decided not to let the people go. So go ahead, Moses. Yahweh sends Moses in again, and Moses explains, hey, look, you're going to need to let my people go. Otherwise, there's going to be another plague that's brought about. And Pharaoh says, okay, do your worst. Moses says, say no more. And he strikes the ground with his staff, and the dust itself turns into gnats, like head lice. And these gnats are flying everywhere so that you can't even properly breathe without getting gnats in your nose. And the magic practicing priests go to like see if they can turn dust into gnats, and they can't. And so they go to Pharaoh and they say, this is the hand of God. And does Pharaoh get the message and let the people go? No. So Moses brings another plague. Okay, apparently you haven't gotten the message. And Moses brings in a swarm of flies. But this isn't just a few hundred flies. This is so many flies that it's covering everything in Egypt. And again, they didn't have screens on their windows. So you have flies inside the house. You can't move. You can't get around. They're in the bed, they're around you, they're everywhere. The people can't sleep, the people can't rest. And the gods of Egypt are humiliated. The god of the earth is Geb. So seeing the dust get turned into gnats humiliated that god. The god Khepri is the god of creation and rebirth, often depicted as a fly or having the head like a fly. So creation itself was turned against Egypt. The land stunk, and only God himself has the control. And so, what does Pharaoh say when he sees that his entire nation is covered in flies? He himself is covered in flies. He says, go, sacrifice to your God in your land. Seemingly, he's letting the people go. So Moses says, okay, good. He's like, please just get these flies out of here. So Moses says a prayer to Yahweh, and Yahweh, all the flies disappear, and there's relief. And what happens? Pharaoh becomes stubborn again and says, no, I'm not going to let the people go. Again, Yahweh reassures Moses, I've predicted this. Pharaoh's not going to just let you go, but I am going to devastate him, and I'm going to make him let you go. And ultimately, I'm going to show my power over not just Israel, not just Egypt, but the entire world. And this will be told as stories for generations. And so he brings upon the next plague of the death of livestock. You see, in Egypt, their livestock was everything. And they had gods that they prayed to, like the goddess of love and protection, Hathor, which was depicted as a cow. So they had a cow god. They also had Apsis, which was a sacred bull that they worshiped. And now Yahweh just killed all of their cows, all of their bull. dead overnight, just like that. This destroys the economy because that's how they deal in their livestock. This is devastating to the nation. Has Pharaoh learned his lesson? No. He doesn't want to let his slave force go. So Moses brings the next plague. But this one is especially devastating because this one affects everyone in their health, even the Pharaoh himself. He brings on the boils. The god of medicine, Imhotep, devastated, unable to help them. They're praying to their gods, unable to help. Thoth, the god of wisdom, devastated. The priests, the magicians, the healers in Egypt, covered in boils. None of them can stand before the greatest God, Jehovah. He is showing himself. I am Yahweh, and there is no one else. There is no one like me. And with Pharaoh being covered in the boils, he's suffering. He's really going through it. He cannot handle it. And he's asking Moses, take this away. But when Moses would take something away, Pharaoh would harden his heart. It happened again with the hail and the fire. Moses was empowered by God to bring down hail, and this was not just like little pellets of ice. No, this was ball size hail that was coming down at lightning speed, and it was killing the animals and the people that were outside. It would actually kill you. So if you were standing outside and you got hit by one of these hails, it was devastating. You could actually die. On top of that, there was what they described as fire coming out of the sky. So I don't know if that was lightning or literal fire, but they prayed to the god Nut, the god of the sky. That didn't seem to help them. Yahweh is embarrassing Seth, the storm god. Can't seem to help them. Yahweh is showing he commands the heavens. He commands the sky. The earth has no protection from him. And so Pharaoh says, okay, this time I've sinned. Yahweh is right. I and my people are wrong. I will let you go. Go. And so Moses prays, and the storm passes, and the hail is gone. And then Pharaoh hardens his heart again and doesn't let the people of Israel go. And so Yahweh says, don't worry. He's going to keep hardening his heart. But I'm making a point here. Bear with me. And he brings the locusts. The locusts come. You ever see what a locust looks like? You want to talk about a nightmare. They eat up all of the fields, all of the grain, devastating what's left of the economy, devastating what's left of the food source in Egypt, humiliating the god of grain, Neper, humiliating the protector of agriculture, Serapis. Do they have any gods left? Imagine being an Egyptian and praying to your gods, and they are not helping. But the moment that Pharaoh reaches out and asks Moses, can you take this away? It disappears. These locusts are everywhere in the houses, on the fields, on the people. Their harvest and food security is not safe from the true God, Yahweh. So, what does Pharaoh say about this? Go, serve Yahweh your God. Okay, you can leave. Moses says, okay, thank you very much. But wait, Pharaoh says. Who's going? Moses, what do you mean, who's going? We're all going. Our women, our children, our livestock, our animals, we're all leaving. And Pharaoh says, no. I don't want you all to leave. You could just take the men. The men can go. The women and children stay here with me. Okay, go. And he kicks Moses and Aaron out. But that wasn't the deal, was it? Yahweh didn't say, let just the men go. No. So Yahweh said, okay, Moses, it's time for the next plague. And so Moses says, okay, darkness descends upon Israel. I'm sorry, Egypt. Egypt is absolutely covered in darkness. They can't see. They can't see anything. They can't see their hand in front of their face. Imagine praying to Ra, the sun god, the supreme deity in Egypt. This was one of their greatest gods. Who turned out the lights? Yahweh. Egypt's greatest god fails. What do they have to do to get the lights turned on? Go back to Moses. Yahweh was right. Yeah, go ahead and go. You can leave. You can leave. You can take the women and children with you. Okay. Moses says, okay, thank you very much. That's what I thought. Thank you. We'll be leaving now. Pharaoh goes, wait, but your livestock has to stay here. We want your livestock. Keep in mind, the Israelites were fine through all these plagues. I mean, their livestock was fine. It hadn't been killed. They weren't really suffering through the plagues. It was really just the Egyptians. Goshen, where the Israelites were staying, was kind of unaffected by most of this. And Pharaoh and Moses says, that's not what Yahweh said. He said, we're going to leave with our women and our children and our livestock. So that's not going to work for us. And Pharaoh says, well, I guess then we don't have an agreement. Get out of here and never come back in my face again. Pharaoh snaps. And Moses says, very well, I will never come back in here and talk to you again. And he leaves. Over livestock, this Pharaoh was willing to risk everything. And everything is exactly what he would lose. Because now Yahweh says to Moses, we're done. The gloves are off. You're not going to have to go back in before Pharaoh, because I'm about to make Pharaoh send you away. In fact, when I drop this next plague, the nation of Egypt, everyone will be crying for you to leave. And so what I want you to do, in fact, since they're going to want you to leave so bad, I want you to have your people, the nation of Israel, to ask the Egyptian people for any handouts. Hey, do you guys have any extra jewelry laying around? Any gold, any silver? You can give it to us like a tribute, like a parting gift, because that's how much they're going to want you to leave. Moses says, okay. Yahweh says, prepare your people. Exodus chapter 11, 12, 29, and 30. Have a lamb killed. Take the blood of the lamb. And before you prepare the meal of the lamb, you're going to take the blood and put it over your doorpost. That way, when the angel of death comes tonight, it will pass over your house. And so all those who believed in Yahweh put the blood of the lamb on their doorposts. And that very night, God absolutely devastated Egypt by killing all of its firstborn. Not just its firstborn children. He killed the firstborn of their animals. At that time, your firstborn was everything. They would receive the inheritance. The people cried out. They begged the Israelites to leave. Please, please leave, please leave. They screamed at Pharaoh and the officials, what are you doing? We are going to die. They were terrified that they were next. And so they started giving their gold and their jewelry and their silver to the Israelites so that the Israelites actually plundered Egypt and left rich. And left they did because Pharaoh was devastated. You see, the son of the Pharaoh is going to be a Pharaoh. You see, the firstborn son was in line for the throne, but when you are a Pharaoh in Egypt, you are a god. Isis, the goddess of protection, did not protect them. Pharaoh himself was considered divine. And so his son was considered a god. When his son died, when he lost his firstborn, it was the death of a god. Yahweh is so powerful that he can execute gods. Pharaoh said, take everything and go. And this time, he stayed silent while 2 million men, women, and children, walking speed, took everything they had and the valuable things of the Egyptians and walked out of Egypt exactly as Yahweh said they would do. Now, who's the most powerful God? There's no question, is there? But there's a deeper lesson that needs to be learned here because Yahweh still wasn't finished. And he explains to Moses, I am going to expose the hardness of the heart of Pharaoh, and I'm going to make everyone know my name so that this story will continue to be told, and everyone on the planet Earth will know that I am Yahweh, I am the Most High God, and there is no one else. And so, in a final reversal of thought, Yahweh sets a trap. And he tells Moses, tell your people to go backwards. They've been traveling already for a little while, but I'm not finished. So we're going to set a little bait. I want you to tell your people to go backwards. So the people backtracked a little ways, and the Egyptians who were watching where the nation of Israel was going, they reported back to Pharaoh, the people are wandering. They're like, it's like they don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're doing. And Pharaoh, his heart became hardened and stubborn and said, I got them. They're out in the wilderness. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're doing. I'm Pharaoh. I'm the highest. I have the largest military might in all the world. I'm going to take my entire military with me, and we are going to go up and we are going to capture my slaves back, and people will know that I am Pharaoh. And so he gets on his chariot and he has all the chariots of Egypt mobilized, his soldiers, his horses mobilized, and they go chasing down a nation of men, women, and children on foot, including their elderly. And he's in battle gear, armor, swords, bows, arrows, shields, spears. Is Yahweh going to let them get close? Yeah. In fact, they were so close that the nation of Israel saw them coming. And then they started yelling to Moses, why have you brought us here to die? The Egyptian army is literally coming to kill us. We can see them riding toward us with chariots. And Moses prays to Yahweh, and Yahweh says, don't worry, I'm almost done. Take your staff, and I want you to raise it over this sea that you're camped by, and I'm going to split the sea for you, and then you can have my people pass over on dry land. And so Moses raises his staff, and the water of the sea splits so that it's walls of water on both sides, but the land underneath the seabed is dry. And it says, okay, let's get going. and he has the nation of men, women, and children cross over the Red Sea on dry land. But this army is approaching on horseback. So they're obviously going to catch up. And Yahweh puts a fiery cloud, dark on one side, light on the other, to throw the Egyptian army off. And so the Egyptian army isn't able to quite see what's going on or to be able to reach overnight because it was too dark for them to be able to see. So they're like, okay, we'll wait till daybreak. When daybreak comes, the nation's pretty much already passed over into the sea, but the sea's still wide open. And so the cloud lifts. Pharaoh sees the nation inside the Red Sea, but crossing on dry land. And Pharaoh's heart being hard, and Pharaoh being stubborn, Pharaoh decides that he will cross over and capture these Israelites. And so he tries. And he goes in with his chariots and his entire army. But they can't seem to catch up to these men, women, and children that are crossing. How come? Well, because God is fighting for Israel. You see, he's throwing their army into confusion. He's tripping their horses, and he's taking the wheels off the chariots. And so, how do you ride a chariot without wheels? The Egyptians came to the conclusion that God is fighting for Israel. So now they're in the middle of the Red Sea trying to drag their chariot, and they're like, hey, we got to bail out. We got to bail out. Yahweh is fighting for them. And just then, Yahweh says, okay, I'm finished. Closes the Red Sea on the Egyptians, doesn't affect any of the Israelites, destroys the entire army of the largest and greatest nation on planet Earth. Egypt may have been the most dominant world power in history. Done. Just like that, instantaneously covered. They all drown in the Red Sea. They were drowned. The Egyptians saw bodies floating up or washed up onto the seabed. Now imagine for a couple of the Egyptians that never really made it in, they were on the back end and they saw this happen, and they're just like, okay, we're good, and they left. They left. That no one questioned or challenged the power of Yahweh. No one chased after Israel any further. Everyone knew in the world at that time and in the world today who the true God was. And Pharaoh died right there in the Red Sea. So what's the point? What's the lesson? Well, not only is there only one God, our God, Yahweh, but it's important to note the stubbornness of Pharaoh. Time and time again, he would not just be humble, recognize that he wasn't in charge, and let the people go. Don't be surprised when you face people in your life, including narcissists, who are so stubborn that they won't just acknowledge when they're wrong, when they won't humble themselves, when they won't keep their word. Don't be surprised. Just know that there are some people who cannot be reached, and be determined not to be that way. Allow your heart to stay soft, your mind to stay keen, and your spirit to stay aligned with the true God, Yahweh.